So here we go. We've got a lot of content here, and I'm gonna skip through some of this kind of quickly, some of the more sciencey stuff, and focus on, give us hopefully time at the end to focus on a little bit more of the practical stuff that people would want to know about and the takeaways. But if we have time at the end and you have questions and you want to go back and discuss anything that we went quickly over, we can do that if time allows. So let's get rolling. Coffee. There are over 100 different species of plants, but only 2 of these are actually traded. Arabica and the Caffea canephora is actually also known as the Robusta version. So Arabica and Robusta are the 2 main sources that are actually traded in the world. And they come from these various countries. And if you are feeling like you want to play along, you can guess and put in the chat which one is number 1 in those countries, the leader of the coffee trade. And one of the biggest things to know in reading all about coffee, I can't even believe how much data there is on coffee. This was one really vast topic. But the bottom line is there are so many iterations of coffee, and there are so many parts to coffee that can vary, that it can really depend on how the coffee was grown, and even the soil in which it's grown, the sun which it gets. All of those things can really make a big difference in the final process and taste and experience. So those are some of the methods and things that really do affect the coffee flavor.
What's the answer, Paulo?
Oh,
can I guess?
yeah.
Or because since we have nobody,
Guess.
I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna say it's Ethiopia.
Brazil, number 1.
It's Brazil. Brazil. I can't wait to learn more.
Yeah.
So that's the answer to number 1. Got it.
Okay. So what's actually in your cup of coffee? I don't know if you'll be shocked by this, but there is a whole lot going on in that coffee. And it again, like, we could spend an hour talking about what's actually in the coffee, the nutritional breakdown of coffee. And while I'm a science nerd, and so is Stacy, probably most of you are not, and you don't want to spend an hour talking about lipids and carbohydrates and flavonoids with crazy names. So I'm going to let you take a brief look at this, but I thought it was fascinating that there are lipids, actual fats in coffee. They're called K-wall and cafestol, and they're important. They're going to be important players in this whole discussion all along the way, for good and for bad. So we're going to kind of talk more about those as we go. Vitamins, minerals, and really shocking, fiber. There's some soluble fiber in your caffeine, in your coffee. And what I found really encouraging about this is almost everyone drinks coffee, it seems like, in the world, which is not a bad thing. But most people are also not getting a lot of nutrient dense food. So if they're drinking coffee, it made me feel really good that people are actually getting, even though they're kind of trace amounts, this is low in fiber, right? It's a liquid and there's some soluble fiber in there, but this isn't something you want to, bank on getting your fiber from coffee. And interestingly, decaf coffee has less fiber than regular coffee. How many calories are in straight up black coffee? Take a guess, put it in the chat.
Come on, you guys, play along, because I think I know, but I'm afraid to put it in there. Anybody want to take a chance here? Petra, that's what I was thinking.
No judgment. So I'm going to keep
0.
going. I'm going to keep going while that's correct. That's correct.
There are 0. We got it, Petra. Yes. We got it.
Yeah, there are no calories in black coffee. So you get
no calories.
You get all of this for free.
And you get a 0 calorie drink, and you get a 0 calorie drink.
There we go. Okay. So just to go into this a little bit more, there are actually over 1,000 compounds that have been studied and identified in coffee. That's mind-boggling. Some of the most studied and most prominent are listed here. They have funny names: quinine, cafestol, chlorogenic acids, trigonel, melanoids. It's just a lot of sciencey long names. And the bottom line is these bioactives have really beneficial activity in the human body. They're anti-inflammatory, they're antioxidant, they're anti-fibrotic, meaning they prevent fibrosis in your tissues and organs. They have anti-cancer effects. Those are some of the highlights. They're just going back for a moment. when coffee grows, it looks like this. It is not a bean. It's actually a seed, and it grows. It's a coffee cherry. And so when you compare the seed and the coffee in its sort of natural state as it grows, the green coffee versus a roasted coffee that we would actually drink, they're very different in terms of what dominates, what phytochemicals and bioactives actually, kind of rise to the top in terms of volume in
Can I stop you for 1 second just for clarification? So are you saying the picture that you just shared with us, the cherry coffee bean, are we calling that's the green coffee? This is before we even get to roasting it for preparation, right? That's what you're calling a green coffee? And what you're calling a roasted coffee is what we think of as the brownish color in that bag. Am I correct? I just want to make sure that we're clear for our listeners.
Yes, and
cool.
Again,
and both have their benefits, is what you're saying.
Both have different qualities. It's just a different. The process changes things in the coffee. And again, it's not really technically a bean. It just looks like a bean. It's a seed. So we're going to kind of move on to something else that really surprised me. So I thought it was worth sticking a slide in here. Coffee used to be classified as a possible carcinogen. So the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the IARC, is a really, big organization, kind of like WHO. And if you're in the cancer world, you hear this organization cited a lot in studies. In 91, they classified coffee that way. In 2016, not that long ago, coffee was downgraded to a group B, which makes it unclassified as to its cancer-causing activity. And really, that's primarily because the research was showing that coffee may actually reduce the reduce the occurrence of certain cancers. And more data, I guess, was coming in as coffee was being studied. Who knew that there are people devoting their lives to studying coffee, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of information on coffee. And so I think the data was really shifting as it came in, and they just felt it was, they couldn't continue that group 2B. So I want to talk about a little bit about what's potentially a carcinogen. Like, why would coffee ever be considered a carcinogen? Well, acrylamides. These things happen during the roasting process, and acrylamides in and of themselves are a group 2A probable carcinogen. And the main sources of acrylamide in our diets, just generally speaking, are coffee and fried potato products. So if you're a potato chip fan like I am, that's really sad news. Acrylamides are formed in coffee beans during the process of roasting, and the content can really vary greatly depending on how the coffee is processed. So they are researching, you can imagine, quite vigorously how to adjust this process in the roasting, how to decrease the acrylamide content, yet continue the roasting process. So that's under study and investigation, and probably a lot of research as we speak.
Paula, just for our listeners' purpose, we don't want to make an assumption, and I'll just say it. Carcinogen. What are you saying? Can you define that for our listeners? What does that mean? Are we calling that something that is not good, right? And then can you take it a step further, just for those people who are not familiar with that term?
Yeah, a carcinogen is something that has been linked to causing cancer.
Got it. Thank you.
And caffeine. So that brings us to this is the money shot, right? This is what everyone thinks of when they think of coffee. And this is probably why 99% of people do drink their coffee, because of its caffeine content. And caffeine's not all bad. So we're going to kind of unpack this a little bit and really understand kind of what's going on in our coffee. So caffeine actually contributes to the bitterness of coffee, which is a good thing, that bite that coffee has. And caffeine has actually been positioned by a lot of studies as a protective agent. It's helpful for cell membranes. It protects them against oxidative damage. And it has anti-cancer activity and anti-inflammatory effects. So as a molecule, caffeine itself, again, there are over 1,000 bioactive molecules in coffee. Caffeine is, again, a dominant one, and one we know about well, but that molecule by itself has those qualities. Caffeine, interestingly, is absorbed by the small intestine and stomach within about 15 minutes to 45 minutes of intake, and it reaches its peak in level in your blood about 15 minutes to an hour after you get it, you take it in. And following absorption of your coffee, it's really widely distributed through all of your tissues very rapidly. So what would change that metabolism of caffeine? So women on birth control, children, smokers, people with liver disease, they will metabolize caffeine a little more slowly. That's important to know. And you will, whether you ingest coffee with an empty stomach or with food, will also slow the metabolism of caffeine, obviously. And the other thing that I wanted to note about caffeine is really the negative data in the studies about caffeine were really about pregnancy. So drinking excessive caffeine while pregnancy can really affect fetal outcomes. It does pass through the placenta, and obviously an infant or an embryo can't process caffeine the way an adult can. So it can stay in their systems a much longer time and can have widespread DNA and serious effects, and it's even been linked to leukemia occurrence in children. So again, caffeine variety and content will vary with the bean you're getting, and we'll get more into that as we go. But actually, shade grown coffee is higher in caffeine, and the half-life of caffeine, meaning the time in which half of that caffeine content is expired, is about 5 to 6 hours. So the full life may be about 12. And for me, I'm very caffeine sensitive, and if I'm enjoying coffee, I got to drink it early.
Yeah. So that's really what you're saying, is that if you're somebody who is caffeine sensitive, backing it into the time that you normally go to bed, the assumption is 5 to 6 hours is like half. We're going to still have half of it within us, and upwards of 12 hours per se. So for somebody who's sensitive, they really want to drink it really, really early.
That's me. So
yeah.
if even with chocolate or anything like that with some caffeine content later in the day, that will keep me up. So depends on how tuned in you are to that. So too much caffeine, you may want to cut back if you're drinking more than this 400 milligram per day, which is about 3 to 5 cups of coffee, because again, everyone's cup is a little different. Every bean's caffeine content's a little different. So, and things that might indicate to you you're getting too much caffeine are headaches, insomnia, irritability and nervousness, a fast heartbeat, frequent urination, even muscle tremors or GI discomfort can be linked to that. There are also some medications and supplements that might interact with caffeine. Ephedrine, which is in decongestants. So if you have a cold and you're taking over-the-counter cold medicine, with ephedrine in it, you might have a double dose kind of caffeine going on and more interaction. There's another one, theophylline, which is for bronchial airways, and echinacea is sometimes used for health and immune system, and that may increase the concentration of caffeine in your blood. And so those three, it's good to be aware that there are some medications and supplements that do interact with caffeine. So let's talk about the flip side of caffeine, decaf. Anyone? So there's a lot to learn about this as well. I'm going to kind of hit the high points and basically kind of sail through. So there are different ways to decaffeinate coffee. And until the mid-70s, all decaf methods were using solvents. And just like it sounds, we don't like that, right? We don't like chemicals mixing on our food and trying to do something to separate things and then leaving a residue, right? So ethyl acetate has been identified as a safe solvent, and carbon dioxide is actually really the most selective process for removing just the caffeine and not other flavor precursors. Carbon dioxide is a gas typically. They do really crazy, funny, scientific things with it to make it useful for this process. But the downsides are investing in a plant that can process decaf coffee using carbon dioxide is extremely expensive. And, anyway, so that's the bottom line, and most places probably don't have that and don't use that. So that's sort of like a gold standard, it sounded like, but the realistic gold standard is the Swiss water or French water decaf. Swiss water decaf was developed in 1938 in Switzerland, and basically it uses water to remove the caffeine from the bean. And
how do you know, Paula? Does it say that on there, Swiss water? Like when you go to buy decaf coffee, if we're looking for Swiss or French water, it says that on there?
it should, if it's using that process, because again, this is an expensive, time-consuming endeavor. It takes about 8 hours to decaf using Swiss water process. So if they're using that and they're going to have to adjust the price, they're charging you accordingly. I'm guessing they're going to want to brag on that on the labels. And if you have a question about whether how your coffee was decaffeinated, you might want to call the manufacturer on the label there. So French water is very similar, and that results in 99.9% caffeine-free beans. So the cup of decaffeinated coffee is actually dependent on the degree of roasting as well. So that if you're getting a decaf coffee, to get a similar taste to a non-decaf, I call it fully leaded coffee, to get a comparable taste, you might have to get a darker roast to kind of balance that out. So interestingly, the many bioactive ingredients aren't, some of them are affected, but most of them I would say remain, and they don't change when coffee is decaffeinated. Good things about decaf, obviously it's lower in caffeine, but it is also lower in acid. It's gentler on the GI for those with reflux. And note that there also are low acid coffees that are not decaf. Again, we'll get to more on that as we get to the end. How am I doing on time? I got to roll. So
good.
This is a quick, sciencey, but just a quick graph of kind of showing you the process of how things are decaffeinated. And I just thought it was fascinating, kind of look at all the different steps that have to take place. So we're going to dive
let me just stop you for 1 second. It's interesting if you go back there. It's fascinating. I guess I never really gave too much thought that there was a whole process to the decaffeinating, which makes sense. Just don't have decaffeinated green seeds, but who knew? It does seem sort of complicated. So if you are a decaf drinker, drink that with a lot of love. Somebody took some serious time to work on that for you. That's fascinating. Great. Love that slide.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I thought, it was worth just kind of popping that in there to show people it's a laborious process. So we're going to dive into some of the genetics. If this slide is making you dizzy, fear not.
A lot of letters.
Fear not. There are a lot of letters. We're going to kind of break it down really simple. So how you metabolize, Stacy and I were talking about how we're caffeine sensitive. How you can know that on paper is by getting your genetics evaluated. So there are 23andMe, that kind of thing, that can identify your various genetic SNPs, they're called, single nucleotide polymorphisms. And this genetic SNP, it's sort of like a code, CYP1A2, it's called, metabolizes 95% of your caffeine. It's also involved in estrogen metabolism. Let's set that aside for just a second. So if you have the CYP1A2A variant, you are a fast metabolizer of caffeine, and that's the most common variant. If you're a C variant like me and Stacy probably, you're a slow metabolizer. Now, again, other variables can affect this, whether you're taking your caffeine with or without food, the caffeine content of what you're drinking. There are a lot of variables, obviously. So it's not necessarily a recipe that's fixed in terms of how the effects might show up for you. But I definitely know I'm a slow metabolizer, and probably on the most extreme end of that, if that's possible. So interestingly, caffeine and estrogens use that same pathway. So there's metabolic pathways. So this CYP1A1, CYP1A2, and CYP3A4, those metabolize estradiol, which are estrogens. And it's been suggested that caffeine might actually influence estrogen metabolism because they're using the same pathway by modulating some of these enzymes, these what look like kind of codes. So CYP1A1 and CYP1A2, they convert estradiol into good estrogen, it's called, and 3A4 converts estradiol into 16 alpha OHE, which is pro-carcinogenic. That's sort of the bad estrogen that can be linked to cancer. And there are healthy ratios for these things. And that can be assessed by a specialized test, kind of where you are on your pathways and how you're producing estrogens and where your balance lies in that. But
can I stop you for 1 second just to bring it back for a layman like me? And hopefully our listeners maybe have the same question. First thing is a observation. I think it's funny that it's sip, coffee and sip. That's a great way to memorize that. But then the second thing is that somebody wouldn't go and get a test and say, I wonder if coffee is good for me or bad for me. You would have that test, and then these SIP codes, these snippets, if you will. Coffee is just one thing that you could identify in a testing like that, correct? And what I'm trying to say is somebody who loves coffee is not going to go and get a test and say, I wonder which of, where I am. Am I a slow metabolizer? Am I a fast metabolizer? What we're looking is an overall test, and then coffee kind of drops into that if that's what we're looking for. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, these are sort of, again, I'm not a geneticist by any stretch. So my understanding of this is that the estrogen, these pathways and what kind of estrogens you're producing can be tested by something called a Dutch test. It's a dried urine test, which looks at your metabolites of estrogens and what you're producing. And again, caffeine happens to work on this same pathway. So, whether you're a slow or fast metabolizer can, kind of show up, but how you metabolize your estrogens wouldn't, isn't a given based on how you're metabolizing caffeine. They're different kind of things, but they're on the same pathway. Again, this science gets really deep, really fast. There's another genetic SNP called NAT2, and NAT2 are you can be slow, intermediate, or a fast metabolizer of aromatic amines, and coffee consumption increased the risk of breast cancer among slow acetylators, but decreased it among fast acetylators. So basically, NAT2 just tells you that there's a role here for that. And there are a lot of different SNPs actually that play into estrogen metabolism. So this is a really deep topic and very sciencey very quickly, but I just wanted to acknowledge that there is a lot to know here, and there's a lot of data you can really gather if you're somebody who, say, has breast cancer and you're really interested in this connection and these pathways and understanding what is going on in your body that can be determined. We're going to kind of move along to coffee and breast cancer specifically, and I wanted to kind of hit some of the highlights. Again, there are many studies on this, and it gets very granular in that there's so much variation in breast cancer. There's your age at breast cancer. Are you premenopausal? Are you postmenopausal? Do you have estrogen or progesterone or HER2 positive or negative cancer? Do you have other factors going on? Are you a smoker? Do you have other situations? Are you overweight when you get cancer? So many variants, so there's no way to really sum them all up. We would be here all day. So I wanted to kind of hit some highlights to kind of help people understand. The big overall picture was that coffee did not negatively impact your breast cancer risk. Again, pulling out in a very, high level view at this data. And in the general population, that was sort of the assessment. Coffee was found to be protective in postmenopausal women and those having the BRCA1 mutation. There were some differences, again, nuances that just kind of shows you how this data shakes out. That if you're a fast or a slow metabolizer of caffeine, and what your body weight is can also weigh into whether coffee is protective or not. Coffee intake in premenopausal women and those with the BRCA2 mutation and had ER positive, PR positive, or negative, that remains less clear. There's, again, studies you can find that are for it, studies that you can find that link negatively. And I will teach you shortly I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to teach you shortly about how to look that up. If you have more information, you want to read yourself about these things, I can provide you studies that I looked at. But there's more information coming on kind of research. This I thought was a great graphic, like the decaf graphic. This shows it's about 1,000 different components with some of the most, well studied, and some of the variations here in the data that have come out so far. And again, this was 2021. It's already really old data. At the time they were accumulating the data, probably 2019, 2020. They published in 2021. So now we're heading into 2024. So this is already probably 5 years old.
Paula, let me stop you for a second. You've got a little, you're cutting in and out just slightly. I was curious to know if it was me and I muted and it still sounds just a little wonky. So just let's pause for 1 second, just do an audio check for our folks. I just want to make sure it's not from your side. I'm gonna try again.
Okay, I'm not getting any indications of unstable.
It's like a lot of feedback. Okay, just keep going. We'll figure it out.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
Maybe it's my papers that are close to the mic.
No, it wasn't that. It's all good. And you sound better now.
I moved the papers.
Ah, okay.
Okay. So we have here some of the data that, again, you can go back and study when you look at the replay of this, if any of this is really sciencey stuff is of interest to you, but we're going to kind of keep moving ahead. Coffee and colon cancer. So bottom line is some studies say it's protective, others say that it increases risk. And again, because people are all so different and we come to life in different shapes, forms, sizes, different genetics, other genetics that are going on, this is not surprising. It varies, right? So people that are heavy coffee drinkers are sometimes also heavy smokers, heavy alcohol users, heavy users of processed meats. That would all tie into colon cancer risk. So you have to understand what was studied in these studies and look at that. What were they evaluating for? One good thing about coffee is another reason people probably drink it is it really keeps you regular, right? Helps motility is, keeps your bowels moving. So that's a good thing. We want to keep bowels moving. We want a good 1 to 3 bowel movements per day. So coffee also can inhibit iron absorption, which would be a benefit when you're talking in terms of cancer, because cancer loves excess iron to feed from. Some of the compounds in coffee can be irritating to the GI tract, reflux, and obviously we don't want you having diarrhea or extreme reactions in a GI way. That tells you that coffee may not be your friend. Coffee also, outside of cancer, it has a positive impact on the microbes and your microbiome. So just like anything that you eat or drink, it impacts your microbiome, which really, the more we study and more we learn, it's really running the show. It's a huge part of your immune system. It's directly linked to so many of your systems, and really everything in your body is linked to your microbiome. So coffee is rich in polyphenols, sort of the same theory as red wine is rich in polyphenols, which feeds good microbes. It creates good, they create good metabolites, that, meaning they eat the polyphenols and then they make other things from that. And those basically serve as antioxidants in our bodies. So this gut microbiome system, it impacts everything. A good gut is a good thing. Just briefly, caffeine intake was associated with a reduced risk of basal cell carcinoma. And it may be also positively linked to, meaning coffee is good also for the risk of melanoma. And about a cup a day was found to be a 3% reduction in cancer risk in general. So again, there's a lot of data on these kinds of things out there. Coffee shows benefits in so many other cancers. We'd be here all day if we were going to cover all of them. So ovarian, prostate, liver, there are so many different cancers that have a lot of study around coffee and those topics. If you have a particular interest that we haven't talked about, I want to empower you to go to PubMed. It's a NIH sponsored website. It is pure science. You can go to PubMed. Here's the link, and enter just your cancer type, say bladder bladder cancer, coffee, those 3 words, and you'll get all the hits that you need to read all about bladder cancer and coffee.
Kim Wilson asks, Paula, is there any link to esophageal cancer?
Yep. Stay tuned. Okay. So we're going to move on to cardiovascular disease, because again, I know I've got a lot of content and I want to get to some of the good practical stuff at the end. Basically, coffee can impact your cardiovascular health. Blood pressure, it can have a transient elevation in blood pressure, particularly in those non-habitual drinkers, meaning for someone like me who drinks coffee on a rare occasion, it will probably more likely raise my blood pressure versus my husband who drinks his coffee every single day. It can make you more insulin sensitive. That's a good thing. It can increase your serum lipids, meaning your cholesterol kind of panel, if you don't filter your coffee. More on that soon. CRP is a measure of inflammation. It can do good things for your inflammation level, because again, lots of antioxidants, lots of polyphenols, and there's really no strong link to any kind of problems with arrhythmias or congestive heart failure or coronary artery disease. In any of those categories, it really seems to be a positive. There's not any strong link to coffee and those things being a problem. And mortality, overall decreased risk of cardiovascular mortality in patients that don't have pre-existing cardiovascular disease already. So generally speaking, caffeine consumption is generally safe in terms of a cardiologist's point of view, but there are some effects on the cardiovascular system that can't be completely disregarded. So again, just like with other things, it's important for you to know yourself and you to know and understand your own body and what it needs. And so drinking coffee, if it spikes your blood sugar, makes you jittery, gives you high blood pressure, all of these things, makes you feel like you have an uneven heartbeat. Those are things to tune into, even though studies say in general, these things aren't linked to negative, strong effects. It doesn't mean it's not true for you. So always know yourself and work with your doctor and your provider. Coffee is good for your brain. We're going to spend very little time on this, but it's good for it. Obviously, it boosts your focus, concentration, memory, the reasons people like it. It also shows a decreased risk with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's in coffee consumption. How hot is too hot? So obviously, coffee can damage your esophagus and your GI tract if you are drinking extreme temperatures of heat. So those our esophagus and our GI tract is one cell lining thick in terms of the barrier from whatever's coming in and the insides of our body. So there's like one cell thickness barrier. And those extreme temperatures can definitely damage that one cell thick lining. And if it's chronic, if you're drinking your extremely hot coffee all of the time and damaging that, and it's sort of like a wound that doesn't heal, that definitely would increase your risk of disease there. So your bones, that's another hot topic for a lot of people. They want to know, does coffee impact my bones negatively? There's some data that it may reduce your calcium absorption and increase your calcium and magnesium excretion. So you might pee out more of those minerals, which you need for good bones, especially with a higher intake. You can compensate for this with vitamin D and calcium rich foods, but the most recent study I could find was from this French Rheumatology Society. They're saying there's really insufficient data so far to give a specific directive about coffee and bone health. So there's no prescription out there for only drink this much or don't drink any or anything like that. They're just still studying this, and there's no takeaway for everyone on that yet. Let's talk about the practicalities of this. Like, how does it come to be? So these are the different roasting options. And I was really surprised to learn a lot of things here along the way as well. Light roast has the most caffeine. It has more acid and it's a stronger flavor. I would have thought the opposite. Medium roast, you can read here, And as you get deeper roasting, again, you'll get more of that acrylamide kind of content. And the oils actually come out of the seed, the coffee seed, and they become more noticeable on the outside of the bean. So if you get a really dark roast coffee and you get it in whole bean, you can actually see that the coffee looks oily. Those oils are the caviol and the, what if I can get it, remember it, castrol, I think castrol and caviol are the lipids. And those are what can increase your cardiovascular risk if you don't filter your coffee. We're getting to that next. So how do you prepare your coffee? This matters also for the contents and the bioactives that'll actually end up in your cup. I don't know how much time we have to go through sort of the details of this, but I learned a lot kind of in studying this and preparing for today. So filtering your coffee is important if you want to remove those oils. You don't want those bleached white filters, because then you're getting some bleach with every cup of coffee. That's not a good thing. So you want those natural looking unbleached filters, and those will catch those oils in the cup, in the filter. The typical preparation methods are automatic drip. So for example, my husband's automatic drip maker has like a gold cone kind of filter that came with it. He also uses a paper filter. That gold filter that is part of the machine will not catch those oils. So if you want to catch those oils, you must put a paper filter on top of that. French press is did I put a picture of it? I don't know. My video is blocking my images. That's where you are putting the boiled water over the coffee beans, and there is a little device inside that you press down when you're ready to drink, and it sort of acts as a sieve and keeps the grounds from the liquid that you want to drink. And there is no filter there. Espresso involves a machine that uses pressure and steam to create the coffee. There's a pour over coffee, which I never really heard of that brand or had that process so much myself. I wasn't familiar with it. Chemex is the brand that sells this equipment. It's down here with that sort of looks like a funnel on top of that glass, that glass, container on the bottom there with the little plant. That's a Chemex kind of setup. And there's a lot of sort of process involved in that. People who are really detail oriented and really like to practice their mindfulness around making their coffee, that might be for them. Not someone with a 1-year-old tugging at them would not want to do a Chemex. Turkish brew, actually you don't separate the grinds from the boiled water with Turkish coffee. It's like all in there. You're drinking it all. And there's that's how reading your coffee grains, like how it's left in the cup, can also then sort of spiral into a story about what your day or your life is going to be like, depending on how your coffee grinds end up in the cup. And cold brew, I learned, is a much lower acidity. I did not know how you cold brew coffee, but basically you take the coffee, you take, your purified water, you put it in a glass container together, you stick it in the fridge. About 18 to 24 hours later, it's ready. You then strain it depending on how you want to drink it, either through cheesecloth, a filter, or just a metal strainer, and get the grinds out. And then you have cold brew, and it lasts longer than hot brewed coffee does in terms of staleness.
Who knew? That's a lot.
Yeah, there's so much more. I didn't even get to there's a mocha pot and all these other things that seemed a little bit, random and too high level that I didn't want to get into. But a big question on people's minds, at least in terms of my clients, is coffee going to break my fast? If I'm fasting, how does coffee, roll into that? Well, obviously, if you're drinking this top looking coffee here, this very yummy dessert looking coffee with the whipped cream and all the things in it, that is definitely breaking your fast. It's loaded with sugar and all kinds of other things that will break your fast. So what's in your coffee, how much coffee you're drinking, how your blood sugar responds to your coffee is going to determine a lot of that answer for you. Because everyone, again, is going to process that differently and respond differently. Because if you're fasting, your body's in this state of understanding there's no food coming in, and it's okay with that generally. it knows how to shift into that mode of, okay, there's no food. I know how to deal with that. And it makes other kinds of energy, ketones and other things like that. If you're drinking your coffee black and you're not getting a huge caffeine or spike or a blood sugar spike from that caffeine, then it might just sustain your fast. Another way to kind of enhance the fasting mode, making ketones, is to drink a bulletproof coffee. And I'm going to let Stacey talk a little bit about her bulletproof coffee because she loves it.
I do. I mentioned in the beginning part of our webinar that I drink coffee 2 ways. And the way that I'm going to share with you is exactly what the picture looks like. I'm curious, and if you feel comfortable, before I go there, Paula, while I'm speaking, would you mind putting the link for the PubMed? Listener asked to have that link put in the chat. And I will also make sure, Paula and I will also make sure that if you have never tried a bulletproof coffee, that we also include that in the show notes. So the way I learned, which is probably quite different than the way Paula learned, is I learned about bulletproof coffee from a gentleman named Dave Asprey, and he's gone on to write a bunch of books. He's big in the world of biohacking, and for time purposes, like Paula, I'm just going to cut to the chase. So it's amazing. I actually have that same one with me. You can buy these. I got my packet, Mom's Organic Market, and I keep my coffee in the freezer to stay fresh. I will actually seal it up. And when I brew the coffee, the idea is, and again, we will put this in the show notes, I use my Vitamix. And it sounds really strange, but I will brew a cup of coffee and I will pour the cup of coffee into my Vitamix. Once I have the coffee in there and it's hot, I am adding one of 2 things. I am adding either ghee, I don't know if you can see that, which is a clarified butter, or I'm actually adding grass-fed butter, one or the other, a tablespoon. And sometimes, not always, the true bulletproof recipe includes what that picture shows, which is the MCT oil, which stands for medium chain triglyceride. Why are we doing that? Why are we adding fats to our coffee? Well, a couple things. As Paula mentioned, if you are somebody who's doing fasting, it kind of keeps us in that state of ketosis. And we're also introducing the idea that fat is the pathway for caloric burn. But as weird as it sounds, when you add your ingredients, the ghee or the butter and the MCT oil to the Vitamix, and you pulse it for about 30 seconds, what happens is it looks like that picture down there on the left that Paul is showing. It looks like a cafe latte, and it is delicious. When I tell you it's delicious, the idea is that you're using this recipe as a meal replacement. You're not using it in conjunction with you. This is how you're starting your morning. And the idea is that you're getting really great energy surge. This is my experience. I don't claim to be an expert. I invite you, if you are a coffee drinker and it's cool with you, that you use the recipe that we put in the show notes and just try it once. My other secret weapon to this is I sprinkle some fresh cinnamon. I grate up a little bit of cinnamon on top. It is, you see me going on a tangent here. It's like a warm fall cup of love. You only drink about 1 cup, and I will share. You don't want to be drinking bulletproof coffee and having a muffin. I'll say that. We've kind of gone off course. This is like the picture that Paula shows with the whipped cream. That bulletproof coffee tastes like that to me. It's just a creamy, textured coffee drink that I very much enjoy in the morning time. So I'd be curious, I'll stop talking here. Has anybody tried bulletproof coffee? Does anybody have any questions about bulletproof coffee? Because I think I have perfected the recipe, and I'd be happy to share my cup of love with you in greater detail if need be. If not, we're going to let Paula keep on going, and you'll be able to try bulletproof coffee on your own.
Great. Thank you, Stace. That was great. I'm going to move through. We only have a little bit left here.
Yes. Yes.
And I was not able to, I can't get into the chat while I'm sharing my screen,
Yes.
but I will put the PubMed link as soon as I'm done sharing my presentation.
Catherine Winkert had asked for that. So one way or another, Catherine, between Paula and myself, it'll be in the show notes, and then we will also get it into the chat line for you as well.
Yeah. So a lot of you might have heard of the mushroom coffees that are becoming really trendy and popular right now. again, they're all different. You have to look at what you're getting and make sure that you're getting good stuff here. Some of them are blends of coffee. Some of them are just pure mushroom. Obviously, they're going to taste different and have different a flavor profile and appeal than your cup of coffee. Some people love them. Some people hate them. You know, you can check out that article that kind of walks you through the various, you know, brands and what they're made of and kind of what to expect with those kind of mushroom coffees. But mushroom they're great for health and immune benefits, and they are wonderful. A lot of people I know take their regular coffee and add mushroom powder to it. That's another option. So there's the whole world of options out there, but I just wanted to kind of mention that.
Well, let me comment on that real quick too. Let me just share with the listeners that Four Sigmatic is unbelievable, delicious, but very, very earthy tone. It's also one that you just rip open the package and you add hot water. So you want to be using that filtered water, but you can get it in different varieties. One's called Think, another one's called Heal, another one's called Calm. But what I really wanted to share is the Ohm up in the right-hand corner for our listeners who just need a little sweet treat at the end of the night. That mushroom coffee latte blend tastes like a delicious hot chocolate. Again, just thinking of ways that you can kind of satisfy the taste palate without kind of going off course and getting into sugary kinds of things. I think that Ohm has less than a gram of sugar in it, just FYI.
It does have other sweetener. At least I have an Ohm, and not the coffee one, but I have an Ohm hot chocolate, and it has either monk fruit or other sweetener in there. That's fine to consume. It's a good sweetener, but it's not going to spike your blood sugar. So a great point. Thank you. And most importantly, let's kind of end on what's really important about coffee. So the quality of your coffee is going to depend on some things. And one is it organic? Because pesticides are a huge issue in coffee. Those trees and shrubs, the coffee plants, they are heavily sprayed with pesticides and insecticides because obviously less product is less money in their pocket. So they're very invested in maximizing their plant and maximizing their harvest and their bottom line dollar. So I would urge you to look for organically grown coffees that do not have pesticide residue, because that is a given that if pesticides were used, it will also remain on the beans and in your cup. Mold is another hot issue with coffee. It can occur in storage. It can occur even in the growing process, depending on how it was grown. Stacy was sharing with me. I don't know if you want to chime in on that real quickly, Stace.
That's huge. That's huge. So we know that we want seeds that are grown in an area where we have high altitude. Why? Because that rain runoff, those seeds are not sitting in water, which is a perfect environment for mold. And I'm not picking on our country even a little bit, but just know this: a lot of our American coffee products are American manufactured. And I don't know one way or another, but I've studied this enough to know that we want high altitude beans, and you would find that in a Guatemalan, Brazilian coffee, and just you're looking for the statement high altitude, right? So bumping on down on the list real quick, that Bulletproof, which this one was owned by that guy, Dave Asprey. He's since separated from that company and started that new line of organic, Paula, like you were mentioning, called Danger Coffee. That's his new company. So again, I'm not endorsing one way or another, but what I am supporting is what Paula's saying, that pesticide, insecticide, mold conversation. That's where my energy, that's what I'm looking for when I'm buying my coffee, is I want to make sure that those beans seeds haven't been sitting in water.
Right. Exactly. And again, the ones that grow in kind of shady conditions also have higher caffeine content. So that's something to kind of be aware of. But that was great. So obviously, you're preferably enjoying your coffee without sugar or artificial sweeteners. If you need a sweetener, there are some safe sweeteners like stevia, like monk fruit, and sucrin is another brand. Again, if you're using stevia, it should look a little bit like dried parsley. It should not look like cocaine, right? So that's really highly processed. Stevia looks like parsley when it's growing in the garden. It should not look like white powder. That tells you there's a lot of processing. So again, make sure you also moderate your sweetness. If you have your super, super, super duper sweet coffee, I've seen people dump packets of stevia into their coffee. Nothing else will ever even taste like anything to you. And just know that, like, the rest of your food, especially your vegetables and things like that, are going to taste very lacking in any kind of flavor. You know, if you can really overpower your taste buds with sugar and sweeteners, even if they're safe non-glycemic sweeteners. So these are some pure brands that I know of: Lone Cone, Purity, Life Boost, Natural Force, Kicking Horse. The Bulletproof, again, that's a really popular coffee. I know a lot of my friends enjoy it. It is a low mold coffee. It's a coffee that is paid a lot of attention to quality. I notice it is not marked organic. I don't know if that's
It's
important.
interesting because it's marked it's marked, the stamp is Rainforest Alliance with
Yes.
With tested for toxins. So
Right.
I'm just curious. I mean, I hear you loud and clear. I'm just wondering if that was part of the separation of starting, because he is so passionate about coffee in general for health. Deborah Hooper mentions that she loves Life Boost. And the one that I was going to mention after that, I very much like Purity. I think that's a great coffee as well. So we definitely, I mean, Paula, kudos, because these are all really good choices. I would say the one that says caramel macchiato, which I know you were just talking about, if I could just do my little plug, because I do this with my soon to be adult children, that is not coffee. That is dessert. And we need to remember that when we are consuming drinks that are in upwards of 350 to 400 to 500 calories, and never mind the grams of sugar, we kind of miss the mark with the coffee thing. That, to me, the caramel macchiato is dessert, right? And so being super careful about where we're getting our caffeine sourcing from. It's not just breaking it down to pesticides. It's like, what then have we done to it? Like our country does so well. We add a dollop of whipped cream to everything and life is so much better, right?
Yes, well said. And again, you guys can look into that Danger coffee. It is a decaf coffee, but it is a blend of other things. There's electrolytes added. There are some other, it's definitely an engineered coffee, if you know what I mean. It's not just a decaf coffee. There's a lot more to it there. And I'm not an expert in it, but I, invite you to kind of Google that on your own.
Yep.
The bottom line is you want high quality coffee, which again means, that it's checked for mold, that it's also, checked for pesticides, and that it's preferably organic. What is your coffee mostly made of that you're actually drinking? Water. Make sure you're not using tap water. Google tap water in your area with your zip code through Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, and you'll see how many toxins are in your local water. It's not safe water generally out of your tap. Use purified water, well purified water, to make your coffee. And then, of course, your preparation method is going to really change what's in your actual cup. Was it filtered? Is it a light roast? Is it a dark roast? Was it, made with, in an espresso machine? Was it made with one of those fancy Chemex? It's going to have a different property, a different flavor, and even different bioactive ingredients in that coffee. So lots of information. Again, we could talk for hours on this.
Yes.
It was really amazing to me how much information and how much nuance there is around coffee. But that's pretty much the presentation. And I want to give a chance to kind of go into that chat box and put the
So
PubMed.
they're just waiting on the PubMed link. And let me bring us home, Paula, if you'll allow me. Paula's contact information was just up there on that screen. I will make sure that that's in the show notes as well. Why do you want to know Paula's contact information? If you are somebody who is listening, who has been diagnosed with cancer, or loves somebody who has been diagnosed with cancer, what Paula does is she works very closely with Believe Big, and she is one of our nutritionists that we can absolutely recommend you too. And if that would be a situation where you had specific questions about your diagnosis, that she was able to work with you. But the other thing is Paula and I work really well and closely together, that if you have general questions and you want to send them to me, it's Stacy at believebig.org, and it's Stacy with no E, STACY at believebig.org. You can ask me those questions. I can send you to Paula. I can answer them, many of them myself with clearance from Paula. So just take a pause and know that you'll have the replay link on coffee. I want to encourage you that I think all of the information, again, I get so excited because when I have the opportunity to work with Paula and folks like Paula, I could spend all day long talking about this. It's amazing to me how something what we consider so simple like a coffee drink could generate an hour-long discussion on the health benefits, the risks, the rewards. My takeaway, Paula, is that if you are a coffee drinker, the best thing that you can do is drink that coffee from a filtered source of water. What Paula mentioned was EWG.org, and it stands for Environmental Working Group. And you can put your home zip code in there to find out what exactly is happening with your water. Why do you care? Because we are mostly made of water, and water hydration and the things that we're eating and consuming, it is top line the best thing. The second thing I heard is make sure you pick a good coffee choice in terms of your seeds. Now that I know that they're not beans, pick something that is pesticide free and hopefully organic. And then the third thing is really take a look back on the replay to find out how we want to manage preparation of our coffee. So that said, I'm going to stop for a second. We have a couple of moments. If you are somebody who has a general question about coffee or just a comment that you want to share with us, Paula and I are sitting here looking at the chat together. I would prompt you and ask you, is anybody on the call going to try my beloved Bulletproof coffee? Has anybody tried it or going to try it now that we've talked about it? Luann says, this has been super helpful and very informative. Thank you. You are so welcome. I mentioned before, Deborah said, I use Life Boost. It's delicious. I don't see any takers, Paula, on my Bulletproof. And what a shame, you all, because you have no idea what you're missing with my fall cup of love. I'm just saying.
It really is. It's so good. With the cinnamon and the spices and the fats in there all blended and emulsified together. It is the best sort of pumpkin spice latte alternative that I can imagine.
Yummy. And listen, I have 3 takers. Kimberly's going to try it. Luann's going to try it. Catherine's not sure. She wants to know, is Bulletproof better than the other coffees mentioned? No, it's not. And I would never endorse one way or another. I like Bulletproof coffee because I liked the guy when I first started reading his book. He doesn't work with them anymore. It's not his company anymore. And as Paula mentioned, there's not the word or the stamp of organic on here. It does have some other things on here, but in my professional opinion, that Life Boost or the purity, I know that those labels are very specific. And I would say for somebody who's on the journey, I'm scraping off any opportunity to have any sort of problem in my coffee because I want literally pure, wholesome, good, pesticide free. So I just like Bulletproof. So I've just been slow to the switching over.
And an interesting point about purity coffee is it's single source. Most coffees are a blend from, a variety of countries. Actually, it's not just from a variety of plants, it's from a variety of countries. So they're kind of taking these beans from all over and blending it into what they call whatever, blend they're going to call their coffee. But Purity is one of the few brands I know of that is single source. So it's from the same place, all the same coffee beans. And that might matter for someone who's really, interested in that exquisite taste that they're looking for.
Deborah says I sold her on it. And I just have a challenge before we head out. If you don't believe me about the taste, not necessarily about Bulletproof, here's my invitation. If you go to the grocery store or you buy online, maybe take whatever coffee you're drinking and prepare a cup, and then try a high altitude, pesticide-free organic coffee and do a little taste test. For me personally, again, I'm not trying to sell you on anything, but for me personally, what changes, the flavor palette doesn't have the bite like there's this, you mentioned this bitterness, but it's not a pleasant bitterness from, like, say, a Dunkin' Donuts coffee, and I'm just talking about not even adding anything. You can taste a big difference, in my opinion, between the two kinds of coffee. Do the test on your own and see how you like it. Like I said, I can't wait to see you all again, because I will ask the question as we open up, did anybody try the bulletproof coffee? Because when I turn people on to this, there's no turning back, because it's a little bit more effort to make it, but it makes me smile. Bulletproof coffee. I don't know. I just feel like peppy. I don't know.
And again, just to clarify for people that might not be familiar with it, bulletproof kind of coffee is sort of used generically now to describe that process of adding fats to your coffee and blending it to emulsify it and make it this creamy drink. You don't have to use bulletproof brand coffee. You know, you can use any coffee, but make it bulletproof style, you know. So they created that coffee recipe and put it out into the world. And so people now call, you know, any coffee that's made that way bulletproof.
We'll put the full good recipe in there, and then you pick the coffee that you want to bulletproof it. So, and then check back with us. Send us a note. Let us know that you liked it. It's a very strange, unusual thing, adding butter to your coffee, but you heard it here first, folks. It tastes good. Everything tastes good with butter, right, Paula?
Yes, absolutely.
So we went over. It doesn't look like there's any questions, but if that should happen, again, Paula's contact information you can get from me. I'm Stacy, STACY, at believebig.org. We want to say thank you. We're grateful for you, and of course, we're always praying for you on your respective journeys. Hope take it easy today, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you, Paula. As always, we love you, and we'll see you guys real soon.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Great day, everybody. Bye-bye.